Breaking news. Lagarde plans to raise interest rates, and Putin will host the meeting. Despite hazy inflation projections, the ECB will raise interest rates. The deposit rate of the European Central Bank is scheduled to increase by 25 basis points to 3.75% today, as announced by ECB President Christine Lagarde. True to form, although. My colleague Paula Tama writes in to report that investors and reporters watching Lagarde's press conference this afternoon will be more interested in any guidance she may give about future rate hikes and any hints she may give for the September meeting than in today's decision, which was widely expected and telegraphed. Lack of relief. There is no simple solution because there is no evidence that core inflation in the Eurozone is in a persistent drop. It jumped to 5.5% in June from 5.3% in May, but there are rising signs that the rate hikes are having an adverse effect on the economy. In the year following launch, evidence is growing after 1 year of the ECB's most aggressive rate hike cycle on record that the central bank's shock therapy is significantly constraining economic growth. Falling purchasing managers' indices and a recent study of bank lending practices reveal that demand for business loans has fallen to a record low in response to rising interest rates. The economic hardship may continue to worsen, and the ECB may or may not take a pause after this rate hike because rate increases normally have an effect after a year or more. Super hawk Klaus Knot of the European Central Bank, ECB, acknowledged that the central bank needs to pay greater attention to the risk of tightening too much, calling a rate hike in September a possibility but by no means a certainty. The schedule for the day. Lagarde is likely to follow her own advice and disclose as little as possible about upcoming decisions, highlighting the central bank's data dependency, i.e., the governing council will make decisions based on future data. In prior meetings, Lagarde managed to confuse observers by sending mixed messages by, for example, emphasizing data dependency in one line and, in the next, virtually disclosing the future judgment. What's next? 2 more inflation readings, significant statistics on wage developments in the second quarter, and updated ECB staff predictions for growth and inflation will all come into play between today's decision and the September meeting. On Wednesday, the Federal Reserve of the United States raised interest rates for the 11th time since March 2022. Officials have signaled that further rate increases may be forthcoming. Russia-African Conference tweet this. Share this on Facebook. Post to LinkedIn. Join the handclap. Hosted by Putin. Russian President Vladimir Putin will today try to attract African leaders at a meeting in St. Petersburg, 11 days after cancelling the Black Sea Grain Initiative and waging a series of air assaults on Ukraine's export ports. Putin must convince his guests that he is worried about their economic and nutritional stability, and that he genuinely does care. This could prove difficult given that Moscow has abruptly abandoned the agreement that permitted Ukraine to keep exporting food to the world and has been bombing grain storage facilities near Ukrainian ports. More on Ukraine's grain below. Those who did not appear. From the list of attendees, it's clear that the leaders of a continent with deep historical ties to Russia aren't swayed by Putin's charms, or don't want to give that impression. My colleague Suzanne Lynch adds that despite this, 17 heads of state from 49 countries have confirmed their attendance. Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum, who is purportedly being held by troops from the Presidential Guard who have launched an attempted coup, would be conspicuously absent from the meeting. According to the BBC, the troops have announced the dissolution of the constitution, the suspension of all institutions, and the closure of the nation's borders. The Russian state-run TASS news agency reported late Wednesday that Bazoum and other high-level Niger officials had not responded to invitations to attend the summit. Brussels officials are keeping a tight eye on the situation in St. Petersburg out of concern that Russia will make friends at the summit. An EU ambassador added on the condition of anonymity, "It's not only about the summit, it's about Putin's strategy and what comes after Russia's war and with China." Minds that aren't too suspicious. Russia has made great strides in the recent past. The battle in Ukraine has cost them nothing, the ambassador said. As one might assume, governments are naturally wary of a partner that invades their territory. The opposite is true. According to Theodore Murphy, director of the Africa program at the European Council on Foreign Relations, Russia is essentially instrumentalizing Africa to assert its international position, as he explained to my colleague Camille Hayes. It's not so much about Africa as it is about elevating Russia's status internationally through the continent. While Russia may have a few distinct goals in mind, improving ties with Africa is likely rather far down the list. Wagner looms. The fate of the Russian mercenary group known as the Wagner Group has been murky ever since their mutiny a month ago. Since the paramilitary organization has played such a significant role in Africa by providing support for a variety of regimes, its whereabouts and allegiances are of great interest to the countries of the continent. Despite Russian assurances, questions linger over whether or not the private military contractors will remain in the Central African Republic and Mali. What's going on? One of the big Russian exports has been Wagner, and the status of Wagner right now is a bit unclear, said Murphy. The African leaders who rely on Wagner will likely seek clarification from Putin on Wagner's status, as I see it. Krasna Ryba, Ukraine distribute on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn join the handclap. A rift in EU solidarity has emerged over the prospect of import restrictions on Ukrainian grain being extended beyond September 15 to Poland and other Eastern EU nations. To review, the European Union, EU, offered tariff-free trade to Ukraine to aid its faltering economy after Russia's full-scale invasion. However, it was difficult for Ukraine to export grain and other agricultural products due to Russia's bombardment on Ukrainian ports. In retaliation, the European Union established land-based solidarity lanes. Poland, Hungary, and others in the EU complained that too much Ukrainian grain was crossing the border, causing market values to plummet. Warsaw, under pressure from Polish farm groups, coaxed the EU to renege on trade agreements made to Ukraine and reimpose temporary import restrictions to stabilize, boost agricultural prices. This is a classic case of clientelism in politics. The European Union, EU, imposed restrictions on food imports from Ukraine, cutting off a direct, market-based source of income for the country and driving up food costs artificially for millions of Europeans. Problem is, those temporary import limits are about to expire, and Poland is threatening to seal its border with Ukraine once again unless Brussels extends the import restrictions and provides Warsaw cash to pay off the perpetually dissatisfied but perennially influential farmers. In a roundabout way, France suggested at a conference of EU ambassadors on Wednesday that countries delay any discussions on the matter until September. 2 EU diplomats have suggested waiting until after the summer harvest to evaluate whether the import restrictions are warranted in light of the continued full storage and low prices in the 5 irritated eastern countries: Poland, Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. Meanwhile, NATO has raised alarm bells over recent Russian attacks on important facilities along the Danube, particularly at Reni, a facility extremely close to the Romanian border. After a meeting of NATO ambassadors on Wednesday, the alliance released a statement condemning Russia's recent attacks near the river, which has become a vital conduit in the shipment of grain from Ukraine and might replace the more traditional Black Sea route. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, has expressed concern about Russia's establishment of a new warning area inside Bulgaria's exclusive economic zone in the Black Sea, citing new risks for miscalculation and escalation, as well as serious impediments to freedom of navigation. When asked for a follow-up statement, the alliance said, "We remain ready to defend every inch of Allied territory from any aggression." On October 24 and 25, Politico Live will host the Healthcare Summit once again in Brussels. Learn more about the program and the brand new passes that will enrich your visit. Get a reservation * right now. More effects of the Russia win distribute on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn join the handclap. As Moscow seeks new allies in Africa, an old buddy is moving away. Today, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni will travel to the nation's capital, where Vice President Joe Biden will try to win her permanent support for Ukraine. Haunts expelled. Maloney is no longer shown as an extremist monster sympathetic to Moscow and whose party has fascist roots. Instead, he appears to be a pragmatic conservative open to doing business with a thankful worldwide mainstream. In this preview of the leaders' meeting, Hannah Roberts, Jonathan Lemire, and Eli Stokel's write that Biden has told many around him that he has been pleasantly impressed by Maloney's leadership in the war effort. Senate Vice President Biden's about-face on the International Criminal Court. According to Biden, the United States should provide the ICC with proof of Russian war crimes in Ukraine.